Guys, thanks for having me out again. Who remembers me from the last time, 2 years and 1 day ago? Okay. Do you remember what I talked about? See?
About Microsoft being awesome.
So I talked about Microsoft Flow 2 years ago. It was really more geared towards what is Flow and how to use it. Right. So the service offerings that we have obviously evolved, and they're continuing to evolve. So the product that's known as Microsoft Flow is actually a bundle of part of a larger service that we're calling Power Platform. So what I was going to try to do is take the content and make it a little more applicable. The last time I was here, the group is called Charlotte IT Pros, right? So not necessarily developers, more admin, architecture, governance, things like that. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about governance on the platform because it is one of the major talking points we have today. It's one of the questions that comes up most frequently as we start talking to customers about the Power Platform. I'm very laid back. If you guys have a question, feel free to raise a hand, speak up, throw something at me, whatever we need to do to make sure that you guys get your questions answered. If you can see the very light gray here, basically what I did is I stole this presentation, repurposed, borrowed, whatever you want to call it. We had our Microsoft Business Applications Summit last week down in Atlanta, and James Oldick is one of our governance PMs. So this is one of his slide decks that he presented at the conference last week. Was anybody by any chance there? Great. I don't want to duplicate anything for you. So all of these presentations from the conference last week are actually available online. So the video recordings as well as the slide decks and any of the content that goes with it. So if you are interested in learning more about it, I do have a slide at the end of this deck that has a bunch of links to different resources. So once I upload the deck to the meetup group, you'll be able to have access to all of that information. Is this going to work here? Yes. So this is basically a representation of what the Power Platform represents. Power BI, everybody's heard of that, right? Power Apps is our no-code, low-code offering for developing business applications. Flow is workflow automation. It's just what it sounds like. It's business process automation, making a lot of manual efforts more automated so you don't have to spend more time on them. Data connectors is an entire framework of over 260 different services that you can connect to through the Power Platform. It includes things like SharePoint Online, Google Drive, Box, Twitter, ad infinitum, right? We have, like I said, 260 plus different services that you can connect to through this connector framework. If you have a service that we don't have a connector for, you can create a custom connector as long as it has a web API endpoint that you can connect to. So we have literally an infinite number of sources that you can connect to create your business applications. Common Data Service is what I like to call a business user database. So it is very much a structured relational database that you don't have to know structured query language or SQL to access. You don't have to be a DBA in order to set this service up or to access the data within it. It's all very UI driven, it's all very business user oriented. You create the entities and the fields within the entities to define what your business objects look like. We'll take a look at it here just a little bit when we do some demos. The other piece that just got added is the AI Builder. So AI, artificial intelligence, a fairly popular topic nowadays, along with machine learning. What we've done is we have democratized AI within the Power Platform. You no longer really have to be a data scientist to make use of artificial intelligence in your business applications. We have a very, image-driven interface to create AI models so that you can make use of that without having to have a data science degree on creating the models and machine learning behind it. So very, very cool stuff that was actually just released last week. So if you're interested in AI at all with business applications, make sure you take a look at that.
Is that AI Builder, is that all incorporated into licensing?
So the AI Builder is actually part of the Power Platform. So your licensing would have to go along with the Power Platform. I don't think it requires an extra license, but I would have to go look for that. If it does, it's probably going to be a P2. So that licensing is above and beyond whatever the Office 365 license is. So as far as who is here today, this is just a quick poll in the room. Who's M365, O365 background? about half. What about Dynamics? Anybody? One? The lone wolf in the room?
What, this user account?
Well, yeah. And then Azure in general. Okay, got another four. Okay. So basically, the point of trying to figure out who's what is just to make sure that you understand the Power Platform itself can interoperate across the entire spectrum of these services that we're talking about.
Does this mean you'd have to be already paying for one of those licenses to use Power App?
So the Power Apps have multiple license levels.
No,
So what I actually did was to.
I use the Office suite.
Office
Which I
365.
purchased.
And we combined
But
them.
I'm not paying for 365, so therefore, I would not be eligible to use your Power Plan.
You're using the Office client apps and not Office 365?
Correct.
Correct. Power Apps is not part of that.
Would not.
Right. The beginning level of Power Apps is an Office 365 tenant. And then you get a certain level with that, then there's a P1 that gives you a certain set more features, and P2 which gives you a few more features. Yep. So, why are we here today? And what it means by here, not here in this room, but why are we here talking about this stuff, is because of the massive growth that we've seen in the service and the platform over the past couple of years. These are just some generic statistics, right? 700% growth in production apps just in the last year. 1.5 petabytes of relational data inside the common data service. It started 3 to 4 years ago, generally available in the fall of 2016. So it's been generally available now for 2.5 years, and it's just exploded, right? And we actually expect next year to be even bigger because now the word is actually getting out and people are actually starting to jump on it. This is just kind of a quick chart to show you this. So the 2 years, it started with what we call innovators and what we've dubbed as hashtag Power Addicts. It's people who start in their own business creating these Power Apps for their business, for their line of business, for their departments, for their company, and seeing rapid productivity gains just in a matter of days instead of months, right? Anytime you create a line of business app, if you have to go through the normal process, sometimes that takes months. Sometimes it never gets done because the resources are short. If you can get the business user to be able to create an app for their department, they can do this in a matter of a couple of weeks, let's say they're just starting out, then that's a whole lot better than waiting months for everything else. Now, obviously, there are concerns about that from a governance perspective, and that's why we're here today, to talk about how we can, I don't want to say control, but how you can monitor and have visibility into what's happening so that you can put some guidelines around it, guardrails. So up to December of 18, this is what we call the innovators and early adopters. And then what we've been seeing since last year is that now that companies have started using it, the corporations themselves are coming in and saying, okay, now how do we expand this to everybody in the company? How do we take that ease of business app creation and give it to everybody who's there instead of just a select few? And that's where we're at right now, is what we're calling the early majority. The larger sets of companies who are trying to go ahead and just spread the wealth. So these are just some of the questions that we get asked about governance and about controlling this platform. I'm not going to sit here and read all of them, but just kind of read through them. And these are more than likely some of the standard questions that you will get at your companies when people start using Power Apps. Some of the big things are, obviously data security, security risks regarding shadow IT. Who remembers when Access started taking off? And all of a sudden you had Access databases literally everywhere. Nobody knew what they were. You get a call from somebody saying, hey, my application's down that I have business critical. Really? No idea what you're talking about, right? Exactly. So that's some of the things that we're trying to address with the governance policies and our management here. Because it is very much like Access in Excel, in that your business user doesn't necessarily need permission. They don't necessarily need approval to go create a line of business app. They already have access to the data. They have the time to sit down and create what it is they need to be more productive. As long as they're not hurting anything else, then let them go do that. right? If it becomes a much more critical application that needs some oversight and governance, then the platform has that capability in it so that you can then promote or publish that app into a more corporate structure, so that it can then align within the IT policies that we have. So again, I'm not going to read this, but it's basically just talking about the word governance and what it means according to Wikipedia and according to Gartner. What I take away from this slide, every company needs governance. Every company does governance in a slightly different way, right? I mean, you might have one company who says we absolutely have to control every little piece of information of every application that we have. You might have another company who's a little more relaxed about it. We want to let our users go, be productive if they can, but we want to control it from the perspective of making sure the data is secure, making sure that certain personnel have rights to do this, but not everybody. And to me, that's what this slide is just kind of talking about, is the differences and the variations in how different companies go about the governance. So our philosophy, basically empower anyone to be a Power Addict, okay? All of these Power Apps champs that you see up here are individuals who took it upon themselves to create Power Apps for their company that increased productivity at the company to an extent that the C-level executives said, hey, this is really worth looking at. And they started proliferating across the company. Half of these people, I submit, for instance, the fourth one on the top there, he was a TSA security guard at Heathrow Airport. He created a Power App to help increase productivity around getting people through checkpoints. They had a lot of paper processes checking things off. He created a little Power App. They were able to get through it a lot quicker. Now they actually have insights into that data rather than having paper that gets tossed in the wastebasket every day. But he's taken that to, he is now part of their business app development team and creating a slew of applications across Heathrow Airport to help make that work. So that's a similar story for almost all of these folks. Actually, the far one on the right, she was actually a teenager when she wrote her first Power App. She was so enthralled by it. Her father was one of these community consultants who started passing around all these tips about Power Apps, and she sat down one day and wrote a fidget spinner. Which, you're sitting there thinking, well, what business application is that at? That's not the point. She learned how to create a Power App so that now she's actually going out and delivering sessions with her father who's a consultant, a dev consultant, and helping companies become more proficient. But it was that easy, right? That somebody who's a teenager in high school could just pick it up and run with it. So, pretty cool from that perspective. Now, again, our philosophy is enabling everybody or empowering everybody, but our philosophy also includes governance. And again, that's the point of the discussion that we have today, is we want to make sure that we can empower the admins to be comfortable with the platform. We want to make sure that the admins and the executives are comfortable with the fact that your data is secure, that the people who are writing the apps have the proper approvals or authority to do so. And the key is kind of these 3 points down there at the bottom. Incent the right behavior by teaching people the right way to do things. Implement your strategy early, so don't let it get out of hand and then have to take it over. And then treat exceptions as exceptions. A lot of times you get an exception policy to something and it becomes the norm rather than the exception. So you need to make sure that whatever exceptions you have in place are truly exceptions and they're not across the board for everybody. So after today, my hope is that you haven't fallen asleep. That you will at least have some knowledge to be comfortable with the platform from a perspective of it has governance that we can enable. At least have some terminology points that you can speak intelligently about it, or at least listen to someone to further educate. That's kind of my goal. I know everybody here has a broad spectrum of experience in here. You may or may not be looking at the Power Platform today, but I would almost guarantee you that if you're working in some kind of a corporation, no code, low code will come up in the next year. It's becoming a very large technology discussion topic today. Yes?
One of the things that, people who have a development background are really concentrate on is writing code that runs efficiently. So I guess my question is, in the same way we are afraid of giving a SQL front end to some databases, right? Which is why they're all reporting databases, right? For a large part. The question I have is, how do I know that the code that these people are creating is efficient? And if it's crapware, am I paying for the cycles they're consuming?
So there's a variation of an answer I'm going to give you. Number one, keep in mind we call it no code, low code for a reason. When you're writing a Power App, it's not code. It's a formula, just like you would do in an Excel spreadsheet. The code is actually generated behind the scenes by the service, and it's all JavaScript behind the scenes. So as far as how do you know whether they're writing it good or not, that's a trust in our service, that we're converting their...
You're optimizing whatever they're
Yes.
saying to something that will run efficiently.
Right.
Okay.
Now, that's not to say that we can't ever make a mistake. Thank you. We do, right? But there's service patches and updates that always happen as well.
And then about charging?
So the charging, the Power Apps service isn't charged by a consumption model. Power Apps is an end user license model. The flow is a per run model and not a performance type model. So you're not charged by the performance aspect of it. Good question. I've never had that question. Anybody else? All good? Okay. So this is kind of what we're going to be going over is these 10 items over here on the left-hand side. Keeping in mind that I repurposed this presentation. This is a follow-up presentation that James gave during the BizApp Summit. So I would highly recommend if you're interested in this to continue looking at the rest of the presentations that are online. And it's a great follow-through on the rest of this. But the three main points, secure, monitor, alert, and action. Those are the things that we're going to be going over in the next few slides. And just talking about how we can do discovery about what's in your environment, how we can monitor what's happening with the environment, how you can alert based on the things that you're finding out about. So, who is building solutions with these Power Apps? What we found so far is that there are two main camps. Right? We have our business developers, what we have been calling citizen developers. I think we're starting to shy away from that term so much because the term developers scared a lot of business users.
I thought you were going to be concerned about this.
Leave that to the politician. So your business user who's creating these apps is just what I said, right? They've got access to the data. They have time to sit down and figure out how to create the app. They get it created in a much shorter period of time than they could if they had to go through a development process, and they're up and running. Often, if not all the time, no oversight, right? It's just the business doing what they need to do to be productive. The next side of it, like I said, once the applications start getting to the point where it's considered critical business need, absolutely, right? We want some IT oversight on it. Maybe some ALM processes to make sure that you have dev, test, production. Maybe we need to extend it, right? What if the application started out as just being something that somebody wrote a form to fill out some data, now they need to augment that data, now they need to search some back-end services. Well, now you get your pro dev team involved so that they can actually create those APIs. The business user can still wire it up. It's just a matter of creating a connector to that service that the pro dev has created. But you still want that to be a little more of an IT oversight structure. Right? It's a little more important nowadays. But those are the two main camps that we're seeing that are creating this. These points down here in the bottom are really talking about the different ways that our customers have started approaching Power Platform. 2-3 years ago, I would have told you every one of the customers started from organic growth. Because like I said, people were finding out about it accidentally. You know, that big bad evil Microsoft all of a sudden lit up a flag in SharePoint. Yes?
Just out of curiosity, but because normally like these things before are kind of owned by, it seems like, or at least maybe correct, they, IT, they kind of has ownership of the environments, right? But a lot of the folks who are actually in there creating Power Apps are more so on the business or maybe the accounting side of the world.
Right.
So is it, who's influencing to get them the access to create Power Apps?
So that's a multifaceted approach, right? And it definitely depends on the maturity level they have with the platform. Excuse me. And part of your questions are going to be answered here in a few slides, but it starts out as just what it sounds like, right? The power user goes in, I'm in SharePoint Online, I create a flow to manipulate my data, I create a Power App to enter my data. IT doesn't even know about it, right? That is your typical shadow IT that started out as being so bad. But what we're going to talk about it here is how that morphs into, now we know about it, now we can track it, now we know who's creating things and whether they should be or not, and what to do about it. So yeah, we'll talk about all those here shortly. But yeah, so the companies, a couple of years ago, they all started with organic growth and then morphed into more of an IT structure or strategy. More often today, especially the larger companies that we're dealing with, we're coming in and they're saying, put on the brakes, let's talk about how we can have an IT center of excellence, how we can have governance around this, and then we'll open it up to the business. So I think it's more of a maturity model that has started changing as the service evolves and starts becoming more popular. So where did apps and flows come from? This is what I was just starting to talk about, is they begin through your normal end user services, right? We lit up a flag in SharePoint Online and all of a sudden people notice this, hey, what's this flow button? What's this Power Apps button? And regular Office 365 users can go in and start creating Power Apps and flows. It's the same with Dynamics if you're a Dynamics user. You'll notice here's a screenshot of Teams. You can create flows and Power Apps inside of Teams as well today. So these are all just normal extensions to your Office 365 experience. And this is where a lot of them started coming from. That's for an Office 365 license. So that's what comes with your normal Office license there. Once they start using extended features, then they can sign up for a Plan 2 trial, or what we call a P2 trial. That P2 trial gives them access to anything and everything that's in Power Apps and Flow. Okay? Again, not a bad thing per se, but it gives them extra features that they can start playing with. A P1, we don't have a trial for it, but it's an extra add-on that you can purchase, and it's just a subset of P2. But then the other flow plans there, P1 and P2 trials or flow free, those are all just different variations of the same service that allow you to start utilizing it.
But is that included as part of enterprise, other licenses, or is that always separate?
The P1 and P2 will always be separate. Those will be an add-on that you purchase on top of your E3 or E5. And then, so basically those paid licenses give you the ability to make those standalone apps. So the concept is if you don't have the extra add-on license, then you're basically using Power Apps and Flow to extend your Office 365 services. That's the way to think about that. Once you start getting the P1, P2 licenses, then your goal is, I'm going to be making application experiences that are outside of Office 365. Could be a standalone app, could be connecting to services completely outside of anything else that you need. So, this is where we start getting into a little bit of the admin experience. So what portal do we use to do what? And so the admin portals, as far as users and licenses, this is all stripped from your normal admin Microsoft.com. On the Power Platform side of things, you'll notice we have a lot of different options here. What we're doing is combining all of this. So one important piece of history I didn't tell you about, the Power Platform itself, the concept for it, actually was part of Dynamics at one point. Has anybody heard of XRM? No? Okay. So XRM actually stood for Anything Relational Management. And so it was the platform underneath of Dynamics 365. We basically took a knife and kind of cut Dynamics 365 off of it, and that platform is the basis for what Power Platform is today. So you'll actually still see a lot of Dynamics 365 branding inside of the Power Platform. That is on its way out. That's just taken a while to get it all out. But the point of that discussion is we currently have multiple administrative portals for the Power Platform. We are going to be getting that all cut down into the admin.powerplatform.microsoft. Power BI is still going to be a separate platform just because it's its own separate product that they're doing things with. And then the macro portals are down here on the bottom. To build an app, that's make.powerapps.com. To build a flow, it's just flow.microsoft.com. So this is an important piece from a management governance perspective, and this is going to help answer, Nate, part of your question from earlier. The environments that you have, that's what these are representing here across the middle. These are physical and logical containers that you can create your applications and your flows and have your business database inside of. They're all regionality based. So when I create an environment, it asks me what Azure region that I actually want that environment to exist in. So I could create one inside of the Americas, I could create one inside of Germany, I could create one inside of South America, depending on if I needed some kind of regionality for that data. If I have some kind of data residency issues or concerns, I can create that environment in that particular region for that part of my company. Then what this allows us to do is actually have different roles and different authorization for each of these environments. So part of Nate's question is who manages these? Well, you can have a different group for every one of the environments if you want. And as a user in that company, I only have access to the environments that I'm granted access to. Okay? Now, one of the key things about this is that all of these environments exist under the same Azure Active Directory tenant. So as long as I'm part of that same tenant, then I can be granted access to any of the environments that I want to. And this is going to be a little more important here on the next slide as well. So environments are tied to geographic location. Let's mention that. They can be used to target either different audiences or different departments. I have one company who's going to have one corporate environment, and they're going to have different environments for different departments like HR, finance. They can have their separation. And then they're going to have one environment that's just a free-for-all. People can go do whatever they want to without any kind of IT oversight or anything. So it just depends on, again, like we talked about with the word governance, what is your company or your corporation prefer? The key point here that's going to be interesting on the environments here is every tenant has a default environment. That should actually say every tenant has one and only one default environment. That default environment is a special environment. I'm going to give it a little air quotes here. It is tied specifically to your Office 365 services. If I go to SharePoint Online and I create a Power App off of the SharePoint list, that Power App gets created in this default environment. As of today, every user in your tenant has maker rights to the default environment. Oh. It gets better.
Oh. By better, you mean?
Interesting. More interesting. So let's say you create a Power App inside the default environment.
They have full control as makers and they can run mine.
You can share it with them. Okay. What's the first thing you do? Share it. Everyone. So that is a little bit of a management headache. If you care. If you don't care, you know, it's not a big deal. If you do care, then that's part of where the governance comes in that we're going to be talking about. The automation to know when something gets created, who created it, who it's been shared with, what connectors are in it, so you can have a good inventory of what you have. Now, I said as of today, everyone is a maker in the default environment. That may or may not change. It's on the discussion table for the roadmap to be determined.
I have a question
Yeah.
about connectors that are available by default.
Okay.
So when Access came out years ago, there was like a connector for Active Directory, there was a connector for Exchange, and those were built into Access. My question is, what connectors do they have available by default? So they can query Active Directory. They
So
can
querying
query the
Active
gap.
Directory isn't that straightforward. So what we've done, there's not an MS Graph connector.
Right, the API.
Right. But they're in every one of the SharePoint Online, Outlook, Teams, all of those connectors have graph functionality in them. And there's a...
So you're asking SharePoint or Outlook, and they're,
Right. So by default, and as of today, all of the 260 plus out of the box, well, out of the cloud connectors that we have are available to be used. So any user can go in and create a connector to a service that they have credentials to. Okay. Hold that thought.
your credentials could be, authenticated users, right?
Could be. So hold that thought. This acronym here is going to help DLP, data loss policies. Okay. So everyone has one default environment. Non-default environments can be created by any licensed user. Now, we're in kind of one of those evolutionary cycles right now. So depending on when your tenant was set up, if it was months ago, then you have to have a P2 license in order to be able to create an environment. We're in a transition where after a certain amount of time, any licensed user is going to be able to create an environment. My first thought was, oh my God, what are we doing? But again, that's where this governance comes in. You can detect when a new environment gets created, find out who created it, cancel it. The other thing is we are going to have a setting that's available sometime in the next couple of months that will turn that off, that only Power Platform admins will be able to create environments, and that's the direction you choose to go. Okay.
When you say licensed users in that regard, do you mean just the Power licenses or an Office 365 license?
Office 365 license would be that.
So you're saying that these people, we have less control over them creating these environments than I do over whether or not they can create a group with teams.
I'm not saying that.
Well, because at least with groups, I can do RBAC and say only these people, nobody or everyone.
And we have governance that you can do the same.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that. It's not as obvious, but it's still, you are able to limit who can do what. Okay. Yeah, and the other thing about the non-default environments, and this is where it gets into, how I talked about when companies start using Power Platform, they start with organic growth. People just start creating things, and then they realize the extra licenses that you buy, the P1 and P2, these are what give you the better control. So as you're creating non-default environments, that's where you can lock down permissions and set up roles that people can access things or not access things as you so desire. So layers of security. So this is actually 5+1, but it's really 5. One of the ones is still in here. But we have Azure AD conditional access. Anybody played with that? No? Sort of? So basically what that allows you to do is at an Azure Active Directory level, I can say if a request comes in from like an IP range, then these users are allowed to have access to this service or not allowed to have access to this service. And Power Platform is one of those services that we have set up that you're allowed to set up there. So we have conditional access, we have environments and the roles that we have within the environments, setting up whether people can be an administrator of the environment or whether they can just be a customizer or maker of that environment. Inside of the environment, the resources, the apps and the flows, you have to be granted access to a particular resource if you're not a maker in the environment in order to access that application or flow. CDS security roles, so we haven't really talked about CDS other than it's that business database. But as any other database, it has its own layer of security. You can create individual roles. You can add users to those roles. Those roles can have as fine grain of permissions as field level security. They can also have user owner security. So I'm only allowed to access the records within this table that I created or that I own. So you can have as fine-grained of security in the CDS database as you want. And then cross-tenant inbound and outbound restrictions to the connectors. I said 260, but I swear to you over the past 2 years, I've seen 20 different slides and it has a different number on every slide, not always going up. So 250, 260. Basically what this is talking about is, let's say as a Microsoft employee, I go into Flow and I create one that connects from SharePoint Online, from our Microsoft tenant, and I push data to SharePoint Online from my custom Brian's a Bad Boy tenant. You can turn that off so that you don't have access to other domains from your corporate domain. So we have that level of security and connection level. Now the +1 that they're talking about on the security aspect is when your data is at rest, right? How are you securing your data? Do all users have access to all the data? Tell me no. Please tell me no. This should be on a per user basis, right? You shouldn't have access to any data that you don't need to have access to, whether it's role-based or group-based or individual user-based. So that's the other level of security that we're talking about. Because keep in mind, we don't just connect to CDS. We connect to 250, 260 other data sources. If they don't have access to that data source or the data in that data source, then they won't be able to have access to the data, right?
That's all, it said all that security on per user basis. So if you have a user that goes in, and is granted permissions to start developing power apps, 260 data connectors. You have to physically go in and set what group that user is involved in or what user has access to which data connectors.
So the data connectors,
Or
that's,
go through.
yeah, that's, you don't give access to the connectors themselves. The concept is that when you create a connection, you're putting in credentials, right? So as that example I gave, when I create the flow and I have an action to push something to my Brian's a Bad Boy SharePoint, I'm putting in credentials for that domain. Those credentials have access to whatever data is on that other side. So think about this like a corporate SQL server instead of the other services that don't make much sense.
Like an ODBC thing, without credentials, it does nothing.
Right. So even on a corporate SQL server that's a database that has payroll information on it, right? You don't want me to have access to everybody's payroll information. I should only have access to my payroll information inside that database. So the point being that that endpoint should have been secured so that when I log into it, I only see the data that I should see. Does that help?
Yeah.
It is confusing because we have so many connectors and a lot of them don't make sense, like Twitter. I'm not going to secure the data at the end of Twitter. It's whatever the credentials are that I go into.
Are you, this might get so dragons, but us as a company, we deal a lot with servers, and we're trying to determine whether or not CDS is the correct data management tool to use, or is the gateway to a single server and execute down to there. Are you going to go at all into, I guess, governance that surrounds CDS in particular? And does Microsoft plan on changing the licensing for CDS down the road? I don't know if you can decide the scope of this conversation.
No, yes.
Because we're finding that when you enable your users to create all this power app, the first question is, we want access to this data, we want access to the data 7 years back. At first we thought, okay, well, we'll put everything up in CDS from our single server so they can have access to everything, we control all the structure, we don't everything's over that. But now they come back and we want 7 years worth of data, and it's going to cost us an arm and a leg in order to get the right amount of space on CDS in order to bring all that data out there.
So that can be a very long conversation. In a nutshell, when I have a customer who's asking me, should I shove all my data into CDS, I say no. And that's not what it's there for, right? It's not there to be migrated into unless you have a specific need to do it or a specific reason to do it. I would actually, unless someone gives me a reason why not, I would encourage you to use the on-premise data gateway to get to the data you already have. Now, there's a lot of factors involved. You still have to maintain the hardware that those servers run. You you still have to update the software that those servers are running. So take those factors into consideration with if and when you push it up into even SQL Azure instead of CDS, because that would cost you the storage that CDS will. And there's reasons for that too, right? Because CDS has everything done for you, right? You don't have to manage it, you don't have to maintain it. You still have tweaks in SQL Azure. So it's really just a cost benefit about what's better for you.
And again, if I'm going outside the sort of specification on the but are you going to go at all into, I guess, when you can tell that an application is becoming too complex for the citizen developer versus?
No, because I don't know that that's an answer.
governmental?
Yeah, I don't know that that's an answer any one person can answer. That's going to be one of those consulting it depends answers with the skill sets you have in-house and the importance of the application that you're dealing with. So what we will go over is some of the analytics. And if you determine there's a threshold on analytics, like, hey, this application is being hit by 100 unique users every day and 4,000 users each month, maybe that's a criteria that you define for making it an IT managed application. So preventing data leakage, this is our DLP, data policy, or data loss policies. What this allows you to do is specify that the connectors that we have are either classified as business data only or non-business data only. Now, it's a little misleading because it's not specifically talking about business data or non-business. It's simply talking about two groups. They're connector groups. If I have a connector in one group, it can only communicate with connectors in that same group inside of the same application. So if I create a Power App, in this example, SQL Server cannot communicate with Salesforce. So I can't have any kind of process either in a flow or in a Power App where those two connectors commingle data. The concept there is that you don't have the accidental leakage of data where somebody sets up a flow that upon new SharePoint item creation, send a tweet, right? So you're not accidentally passing data out across the wire. One of the key points about all these connectors and about the Power Platform itself is that we don't escalate privilege ever. Whatever a user can do with Flow and Power Apps, they could do manually. It's just an automated way to do things at this point. So what this allows you to do is set some corporate definitions around what type of connectors can communicate with the others within the same application. Okay? So you can define multiple data loss policies and apply one or more to each of your environments. So if you remember that slide we had with the environments at the dev, test, production across the 3 different regions, you can have a different data loss policy for every one of those environments. So that if I have an application, let's say your marketing team does need the ability to send something out on Twitter after it creates a SharePoint list item. Maybe that's their marketing campaign strategy. They would need their own environment that allows that to happen. Whereas the rest of the corporation says, no, anything that's created out here, you can't connect those two together. Does that make sense? One of the key points being that if you have multiple policies applied to an environment, it is most restrictive. So one of the things you cannot do is create a corporate DLP that applies to everybody, because more than likely your corporate is going to be the most restrictive. So you need to use the apply to all except, as well as the only selected options in order to make sure your strategy is not stepping on each other. So this is just kind of an add-on that we did back in January. When the original data loss policies came out, we didn't have access for the HTTP connector or the custom connectors to be placed in the right data groups, and that has since been fixed. So we have PowerShell commandlets that allow you to put custom connectors inside your DLP groups, as well as the HTTP connector. Everybody secured out? Yes? All right. So we're going to move on over here to monitoring. And basically, one of the key points in monitoring today is Office 365 security and compliance. Right? Anybody played in the audit logs in Office 365? You may or may not have noticed there are now some Power Apps and Flow categories, and we have audit events there that you can pull out and actually pay attention to what's happening inside these environments. And this is actually one of the key methodologies that we use to determine, if you're monitoring for events that somebody published a Power App. Great, now you know what that Power App is, go take a look at it, see who published it, see what connectors it's using, so you can determine whether it should have been created or not. And this is just kind of an example of what some of that looks like. But again, a few points. We have an API to query this. Some of our vendors are actually using it today. The word on the street is that we're actually going to have a connector that you can use to connect directly to the audit logs now. As it is today, you have to create a custom connector or some custom code to hit this API. We should have an out-of-the-box connector for that coming soon. So this is just talking about the different events that we're actually throwing into that audit log if you so choose. Important ones, obviously, created flow, created app, published the app, or restored an app. Launched an app is an interesting one because that tells you how often something's being used, right? You can determine what the usage is for a particular application by watching some of these events as well.
Does that include the Power Apps that are, embedded as a SharePoint flow?
Yes.
It doesn't matter if it's.
And that's actually a really good point to make and be aware of, because those are special. Again, I'm going to do my air quotes. Because they won't necessarily show up in the default environment when you're looking at it, especially if you're doing customized form instead of a SharePoint or app. So you have to treat those a little bit differently when you're starting to look at this data. Analytics. So this is the new Power Platform Admin Center that is going to be encompassing everything. And analytics gives us a view into storage capacity, common data service. I'm going to show you that here in just a second, so that we can see what's there. Currently requires the Plan 2 license or global admin or environment admin to see these analytics. So if I'm a global admin, I actually have rights to every environment in my tenant. But if I go create a new environment and I'm not a global admin, then I have admin rights to the one I've created. I may also have admin rights to other environments that someone else has granted me access to. If I go to this admin center, then I'll see every environment that I have an admin right to. So that way you can keep track of everything that's going on. And some of the other analytics that we have are these maker analytics. I'll show you that. I'll show you that when we get into the demo real quick just to see it, but it's not something we're really going to go into. But it's a way that a specific app owner can take a look at the usage of their own apps so that they can see how they're being used, where they're being used, and they can determine if there's anything else they might need to do. So, let's take a quick look. So this is that admin Power Platform Center that we're talking about. And if we go in here to the capacity section, this is important because of another change that we're doing. This is part of that transition I was talking about earlier. Previously, it was all charged based on the P1, P2 license structure and storage. And what we've done is we've changed that whole storage model into something called capacity, which allows it to be used a little more efficiently. So we now have 3 different types of storage: database, file, and log. And this gives you a good overview of how your storage is being used inside your tenant. And you can monitor this and alert on it. So if you start getting low on storage or capacity, you know you might need to purchase some more or figure out who's using it all. So you can go turn it off if you need to. So down here, of course, is a little bit more about the different types of capacity and the sources that it's coming from. And if you need to, you can go to per environment over here to see which environments are using the majority of the storage or capacity. The other thing we see on analytics here is, let's say, so here's the common data service. And this is just a series of analytics about all the different services, common data service flow and Power Apps. And for instance, what API calls, what operations happen. I must have been doing some kind of testing today. Nobody remember doing that. Could be a flow, I don't know, but have to go take a look. But all of these tabs across the top are just different instances of analytics that we have. Now this data that you see here is very snapshot useful, I guess is the right way to say it. This is not historical. It's going to be kept for 28 days and then it's a rolling window. But all of the data you see here can be gathered from other sources like the auditing logs, the analytics at the management layer that we'll show you here in a little bit. But all of that information, if you want like overall historic data, you need to be pulling that information out and shoving it into a data warehouse somewhere so that you can run reports across it. And then of course we have flow for more analytics right here. And these are all Power BI charts showing daily runs, weekly runs. You can change the filter to either show different time periods or to show the different environments that you're actually working on.
This admin center's pushed out to all tenants right now?
It should be.
What they are pushing out?
This should be pushed out to all tenants, but it's not being completely unified yet.
Okay.
And there may be some features here that you don't see just yet because I'm in a special tenant. So, but in general, we're at most a week behind. So anything you don't see here that you think you should, let me know. We'll take a look at it. The other analytics that we were talking about at the maker level. So if I go back over here to my apps, those aren't going to have anything. Let's see.
Brian,
Yep.
when you get to a good time, let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay. We can do that right now if you'd like. Okay. So that was a quick demo of the admin analytics that we have coming in the platform, Power Platform Admin Center. And then, so we're going to move on a little bit here. Automating reporting is one of the big things that is important for the platform itself. So what we've done is we've actually implemented some connectors that help with the management of management information, as well as some PowerShell commands. So anything we can do in the connectors, we should also be able to do in PowerShell. So the reason we get two interfaces is for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of customers have gotten used to PowerShell, right? They have skills in PowerShell and they can use PowerShell very effectively. So you can automate these scripts, pull the information out that you need about the environments, collate it all into information as far as reports or shove it into data warehouses or whatever else you need to do with that information. And what this information is a lot of information such as how many environments do I have? What are these environments? Who owns these environments? Who has rights to these environments? Who has created applications? What connectors are in the applications? When was it last launched? So a lot of information about the usage of the environments, about the usage of the applications and the flows, shoving it all into a data warehouse so that you can then generate reports on it. And the fact that makes it even better is just that it is very flexible, right? These connectors simply return data. Whatever you do with the data is up to you. So that's going to be an important point once we get to the end here. And I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. I know we're running a little bit behind, but I hadn't done this presentation yet, so I wasn't sure how long it's going to take. So this is some of the, we have a link there to some PowerShell scripts on downloading some activity reports. And then the other thing here that we're showing is we have a flow template. So you don't have to start from scratch trying to create a flow template to pull down your information. We have a template here that you can just start with it, put in your credential information for your tenant, set up the recurring schedule that you want to run this flow on, and it will go ahead and start pulling data back and sending you an email report every however often you configure it. So you'll get an email about the information that's going on in your environment. It makes it very easy to start seeing some of the information. Now, I would caution you on this before you just say run, to actually interrogate the template, take a look at it, see what it's actually doing. Some of these templates that we have available for you, especially once we get to the COE starter kit, will interrogate every environment that you have access to and every resource that's in every environment. If you are a global admin at O365 level and magically someone has created 10, 15, 20 environments and you have 200 apps in every environment. Number one, it's going to take a long time, but if it's going to send you an email report of all that information, it's going to be impossible to go through, right? So you're going to need to kind of have an idea of what you have in the environment before you run these. So I'm going to skip this for a second. We'll run back to it here in a minute. So 7 down, right? 3 to go. And this is probably one of the most important sections here. This is leading us into that center of excellence starter kit that I was talking about. So alerting and actioning. This is actually a duplicate slide from what we had a minute ago. Getting the information to alert the recording is all about these connectors in PowerShell so that you can get the information out. So some of the examples about what's easier to use with PowerShell versus the management connectors. If I just want to get a number of environments, apps, and flows with PowerShell, it's really easy. If I want to get things like alert somebody when a new resource is created, well then I'm probably going to want to use a flow with the management connector because that's what a flow does, right? It's a whole automated process. It's not just a single step. So you can pick and choose which bullet points that you like the most, and here's some more links around the information. Like I said, I've got a slide at the end that has all these resource links available in one place, so you can kind of take a look at those. But one of the ones that I thought was interesting was automating the environment creation with approvals. So if somebody wants to go create an environment, you can have that flow intercept that and then send an approval to their manager saying, hey, Joe wanted to create this environment, is this okay? The approval service is another service inside of Flow that actually sets up email notifications as well as mobile notifications. So the manager gets an email and says, oh yeah, that's okay, clicks approve. Then the Flow continues processing and goes ahead and creates the environment that Joe wanted and it does whatever is required. Or if they say, no, Joe shouldn't be creating environments, then it cancels the whole process. Cleaning up environments no longer needed. One of these slides, I think it's the next one actually, but these two slides were actually one of our customers that was at the BizApp Summit, and they were allowed to, so this is the oversight portion, they had this flow set up just exactly like what we were talking about. So when somebody went in and requested to create an environment, it went through the approval process, and he had held the approval until he was doing the presentation at MBAS last week. But it was just one of those things that actually, it's very common sense. It's something that you would have in every IT process you have today, but this helps automate it all, so it's not as cumbersome and manual as what some of the other processes are. But this one is actually very interesting as well, because what you can do is you can determine somebody created a flow, they're not in our list of approved flow makers, so you can send them a welcome email. Hey, we see you just created your first flow. Here's some information. Here's the IT help desk who's responsible for Power Platform. Here's our rules and restrictions about how you're using the Power Platform. Whatever you want to put in that email, of course. Or in some cases, some departments don't want that welcome email sent. They just want the flow stopped and then be notified who's creating it so that they can figure out who's trying to use the platform, what are they using it for, how can we determine the best way to move forward as a productive team. So any flexibility in any of that process, every customer is going to have their own setup on how they want to do this.
When you say that, is it a witch hunt?
Say again?
What you just said, is that usually a witch hunt?
I did not say that's a witch hunt.
I'm just curious. Why is he using this way?
So, and it's not meant to be that way, but with every power, someone can use it, misuse it, I guess is the right word. But it is meant to be discovery, right? So like we talked about with organic growth and everybody starts using it before IT even knows it's in place, this is one way you can find out who's using it, and then you can go have a discussion with them. What is it you think you want from this? Is it something we can help create even more quickly for you?
Or that's not something you generally block people out of, you don't want them.
So the other step for that is creating an Azure AD group that is allowed Power Platform users. And when an artifact gets created, if that person's not in that group, delete the artifact, disable the artifact, send an email notification. You're not in this approved group yet. Go take this certification training before you can be added to the group. Something to that effect. Okay? Yeah, and this was about identifying and empowering champions. So this is along those same lines we're talking about. People who haven't necessarily been approved or certified to use it, but we can identify who they are and push them in the right direction. The Center of Excellence Toolkit is something that just released last week. I've got a pre-version of it that I'm going to show you. But basically, it is a collection of resources. There's a couple of applications, there's a couple of flows, there's a Power BI dashboard, and I can show you the dashboard that's the release version. What this does is allows you to have a little more interface management towards your DLP processes, towards the inventory collection of what's in the environment. You can then customize the Center of Excellence Toolkit to do what you need it to do, right? Like we've talked about, some of these processes can be very flexible. Every customer is going to want something different inside of their processes. So we've made this as just kind of and we call it a starter kit for a reason. This is to get you started. Once you have it in place and understand how it works, then you can modify the artifacts to do whatever it is that you need to do. So this is an example of the Canvas app that is a DLP policy. So you can almost do a what if inside of this application. If I move this connector down to this group, which apps are going to be affected? So before I actually enforce a DLP policy, I can figure out which apps are going to be affected so I don't break them. We can at least notify people ahead of time. Right? I saw that. What a miracle. And then the Power BI dashboard, again, I'll show you what I have from this, but basically this just gives you, insight into who's using it, how they're using it, where they're using it, how often they're using it, how important is the Power Platform to your corporation that you didn't even know about, or is it, right? Maybe nobody's using it, and it's something that you need to advertise, right? It comes partially with Office 365, so you're paying for it. Why not use it and start being more productive? So we've covered all these. Questions?
These come from Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments.
They do. Not. Serious questions. All right. So remember, this came from MBAS, so this is pointing to other sessions that should be attended so that we can understand what else was there. The managing and automating is actually a wonderful session. It actually starts getting into ALM processes for some of your Power Platform objects. Tried and tested techniques for establishing the Center of Excellence. Like I said, this is something we're really gung-ho about right now because a lot of our corporate customers are really on this, we need to put guardrails up, right? We don't want to prevent people from being productive, but we need to know what's there, and we need to know, how we can manage it. So this is that resource slide I was talking about. Once I finish modifying a few of these slides, do I just send it to you, Kevin, or upload to this site, or?
Send it to me or Gregor.
Okay. So we'll get that to you. You'll have all these links that you can access all of this information from. So I'm going to jump back over to the demo here again for just a second. This is the pre-release version of the Power BI report that I have. And basically what it does is well, that doesn't help you, does it? That's not good. All right. So this is the pre-release version of the Power BI report. It shows me I have 5 environments, there's 7 premium connectors in use, 29 Power Apps, and all of this was created based on a couple of flows that I have in my environment. So if I jump over to...
That was custom that you created?
I personally did not, but it was somebody, one of my teammates.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's not even Power Apps.
The Center of Excellence Starter Kit has its own, and I'll show you that here in just a second. I just wanted to show you what started this whole Center of Excellence Starter Kit. Jump over here to Flow. So this environment inventory flow runs on a schedule. And basically, I set a couple of variables. So has anybody used Flow at all? Couple? Okay. So for those of you that haven't, Flow is our drag and drop automation workflow engine. And basically what these purple actions are we're creating a couple of variables inside of the Flow. So we create a couple of these variables. And then this action is part of that management connector suite that we talked about. So it says get all environments. So all it's going to do is enumerate all of the environments that I have admin access to. So again, whoever I publish this flow as, if they have access to all of the environments in the tenant, then it's going to enumerate all of the environments in the tenant. After I've enumerated all of those, then we have this apply to each, which is going to check a SQL server to see if that environment already exists in my inventory. If it does, we're not going to do anything with it. If it doesn't, we're going to add it to the inventory. And that's basically what this is doing, is we check to see if it exists. If there's any returned items, then we're going to add it if it's not in there. And then we're going to enumerate each one of the environments for all of the flows that exist and for all the Power Apps that exist. And we're basically doing the exact same thing. We're going to go in here and update the flow table for all of the flow information, and we're going to update the Power App table for all the Power App information. Very simple when you look at it on the surface, right? We're simply enumerating environments, enumerating resources in the environment, shoving the data into a SQL Server table. And then what are we doing with that SQL Server table? We're pulling it into Power BI and generated some pretty graphs and charts to show us what we have and what's available. So pretty straightforward if you look at it, rather simplistic. But what we did is we took this pre-release version and we turned it into, like I said, that whole starter kit. And what the starter kit consists of, not sure how easy this is going to be to see, it's pretty small, but it's a collection of files. These zip files are actually solution packages that you would import into your environment. The PBIX, of course, is a Power BI dashboard, and that's what this is here. So this has a tab for environments, for apps, for flows, for custom connectors, for makers, which is going to identify who has rights to these environments to make the resources in each of the environments. And this is how you're going to get that information about what's going on in the environment. So this is simply an inventory type application. But what about alerting? Well, you can do the flows the same way, right? You use the flow to find out what's been created. If it's something new that wasn't in the list the last time, then it's something new that you have to figure out what all it's doing and find out how it's useful. So that starter kit, like I said, is available today. It will be evolving as time goes on, as the product group decides to add new features or add new fields or things. But if you start playing around with the Power Platform, I strongly encourage you to pull that down, take a look at it, and see how it can be used to help you with your IT governance and policies around the Power Platform. So, no more slide decks. Thank you. Normally, that doesn't take so long. No more demos.
It's not 8 o'clock at night.
Is ask a question or comment, or because you have to help?
Ask a question. Ask a question is a Power BI function that allows you to ask a natural language question about your data. So theoretically, I could take that data and say, how many users launched a Power App last month? And it would actually show me that in your data. I don't know if that works with our data though. I haven't tried it out. So the main point is Power Platform is powerful. Get it? It is very much to empower your business users. Hashtag. Thank you. So your users can become hashtag power addicts. I'll be here for another 10 minutes. No, seriously, it's become a very big deal for us. You may or may not have heard of the 3 clouds of Microsoft: Office 365, Azure, Dynamics 365. We're not officially labeling the Power Platform as the 4th cloud, but it is being talked about as that important. So there's definitely huge investments coming in this platform. It is definitely helping corporations, business users become more productive much more quickly, taking those manual automated processes, paper and pencil, getting rid of them. So we're saving the environment, right? No more paper. But we also want to show you know, the admin side, right? That you don't have to just be the wild, wild west. You can control or at least monitor what's happening in the environment and allow your customers to do what they need to do to be productive. So any questions? You just want the tickets to be dropped, don't you?
So, if you wanted to do mostly reporting, should you do that within, like, which of the Power Apps would be best suited without me having to go buy the standalone subscription?
So if you're talking about reporting,
Right.
that's Power BI. That's not even Power Apps or Flow. Now, if you're talking about consolidating a lot of different data sources into one chunk to report on, I would probably encourage you to look at data flows in Power BI. The source for data flows is going to be CDS. So you can set up data integrations
Right, goes
that
to the
actually
data.
pulls all that into one location. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Where does Sentinel fit into this power?
Sentinel.
Yeah, it's that security package, but you guys offer triggers and power.
So I'm going to plead complete ignorance. I don't know what Sentinel is.
That's,
Why don't you
that's
Google
the
it?
SIM, right? That's their SIM.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's completely separate from PowerShell.
So if that's what that is, then I'm sure that it monitors the 0365 audit. So you would pull the events that we throw into there. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not up on that one. Everybody good? We're all hashtag power addicts now?
Power Addicts.
All right.